Hello, everybody. I'm Zeus Caravella. I'll be your moderator. We're just going to wait a minute or two for more people to join. So just if you're on now and you're listening, just hold tight. We'll be back in a second. Thanks. All right. Well, I think it's time to get going. Welcome, everybody. I'm Zeus Caravella from ZK Research, and welcome everyone to this ONUG webinar sponsored by NetBeez. The topic, of course, is rethinking the network in the face of the future of work. Obviously, there's been a lot of changes over the last year or so. That's maybe the understatement of the century here. So, you know, obviously the network plays a big role in companies' digital plans, and so I think it's important to understand how that's changed. Now, joining me is Stefano Gridelli, the CEO and co-founder of NetBeez, and Giovanni Paliska. He does business development at NetBeez. So I'm going to do a short intro, then we'll hear from these two gentlemen, and we'll do some Q&A at the end. Now, for Q&A, we are using the Zoom webinar platform. There's a chat function and there's a Q&A function. If you could please use the Q&A tab, not the chat tab for questions and answers, that would be awesome. Giovanni and Stefano told me before this that they're the two smartest guys in the networking industry, and there's no question that they can't answer. So feel free to ask what you want. And I think I am. So between the three of us, we should have your questions answered. Just before we hear from NetBeez, I just want to give you some interesting data points from my research. You know, the work from home trend is real. It seems like every day I read in the media about a company that's announced what their work from home plans are. There isn't really a consensus from organizations of how this is going to work. Some companies say they're going to bring everybody back. Other companies say they'll leave it completely flexible to the worker. Other companies say that they'll have people come in 2-3 days a week and they'll work from home the rest of the days. The one commonality, though, is almost every organization has a work from home plan. In fact, 90% of organizations have implemented some kind of work from home since the COVID-19 outbreak. That number isn't going down anytime soon. The number of workers might, but I think from an IT perspective, you need to plan for an environment where everyone's in the office, no one's in the office, and every possible combination in between, right? And that's markedly different than what you had to do just a couple of years ago. 61% of respondents in one of my surveys said they indicate application performance is the biggest barrier to effective remote working. So we're all subject to sort of the vagaries of broadband. We have to worry about Wi-Fi at home. We have to worry about cloud resources. And for most organizations, the existing monitoring tools are a big black hole, right? For, you know, as far as work from home goes, they just typically don't have insight past that corporate boundary. And so when app performance is a problem, it's very difficult for IT today to be able to troubleshoot that. And that takes me to my next data point, that 71% of trouble tickets are actually opened by the end user, not the IT department. And the important stat there is that from an IT perspective, you're always working behind, right? You're in firefighting mode constantly because you keep getting these urgent requests from users that things aren't working. And then you have to start your troubleshooting process from, you know, is it, you know, access to the VPN? Is it access to the network? Is it connection to the cloud? Is it the cloud vendor itself? It's a very complicated mesh of technologies that actually allows them to work from home. And lastly, 87% of network pros, and this is maybe the biggest, the most salient point for the people on this webinar, is that 87% of network professionals claim that their remote workers are a big blind spot for their current management tools. And I talked about this before, where they have good insight into the LAN, the data center, things like that. But most of them weren't really ever designed for a world where everyone works remotely, right? That just wasn't, that was so far off a company's radar even 2 years ago that why would you ever look at that as a criteria for a management tool, but now that's the reality. So with that stage being set, I'm going to turn it over to Giovanni, who's just going to take us through a little bit of an introduction on NetBeez and what they do, and then we'll hear from Stefano later as he gets into some technical details. So Giovanni, over to you.
Thank you. Welcome everybody. Glad I can attend this webinar. Hopefully it's going to be informative for you on a very topical subject these days, which is the remote from work environment. A little bit about the company. NetBeez was founded about 7 years ago in 2013, roughly, with the purpose of helping network engineer identify issue based on the user perspective and monitor their performance between data center and remote sites as well. So the very purpose of the product and the solution was based on the fact that traditional tools that were built for and came from legacy networks were not built for the new distributed network environment. And a couple of problems with that specific statement are the visibility was very limited to device status. You could check whether your router switches were on. You could tell that everything was working. In a word of one IT department, a network engineer, he told me all the lights were green, but people were complaining. So it was really about performance monitor more than it was about device status. The other big problem, as expressed even in the last statement, was there no insight into user experience. So being able to understand what the user is experiencing and their connectivity, their insight into the product is really helpful for network engineer to be able to diagnose problem quickly and effectively. Reports were delayed, fragmented, the data was sparse. It wasn't really significant information that could help engineers determine where the issues were. And at the end of the day, a lot of tickets were unresolved, and customer, meaning the end user within the organization, were complaining about problems that wouldn't be solved. And specialized skills needed on site. So if you have to send somebody to a remote office, the cost is fairly prohibitive. I think a ticket involving some network engineer going to the remote site is very expensive. Obviously, in the remote environment, that is a very pricey proposition. We have over 100 customers. A lot of our customers, a very significant amount, are Fortune 2000, and a very a reasonable amount of customers in the Fortune 500 environment, the big names that use our solution in both remote worker experiences as well as in the office and remote location they have distributed throughout the country or the world globally. So working from home, it's hard to believe, but it has become the new normal. And the pandemic has certainly created this effect with COVID-19, where suddenly overnight, organizations had to create remote workers that previously were rarely the use case. Companies have VPN, some people have access to VPN if they worked in the field, like sales organization, they certainly plug into the company, but it wasn't really a scaled effort. It was limited to a certain amount of employees and people. Pandemic changed all that. So now everybody is a remote worker, at least for the last year and a half or so. And everybody had to remotely log into the company to be able to work. The effect of this have been pretty significant. And some of the fear that people have in the beginning, especially at the executive level, was that the productivity of these home users, remote workers, would drop significantly. That turned out not to be the case, and for many reasons, some of which are really relating around the fact that people worked actually harder and longer at home than they did in the office, because they suddenly didn't have to worry about, I gotta get on the road, I gotta hit the traffic hour, make sure I don't get the congestion. And I think their quality of life was improved because now they can spend more time with their family and really get to still work. And I know in my case as well, my dinner with the family follows by some work and productivity afterwards. So there is a benefit to all this. And certainly some of the other benefit from a pure cost perspective, some of the offices, companies shut down some of the remote offices, and the real estate cost in many cases dropped significantly and impacting the bottom line. Now, with all the benefits that come with this sort of model, there's also a number of challenges that are purely, I would say, technical, and for many reasons, some of which are dependent on the fact that consumer-grade equipment certainly doesn't match the enterprise network environment. And so you have a number of users that have different type of routers and modems and whatnot. They have an infinite variety of these devices. They don't really understand. They're not technical people. So engineers get questions like, hey, I can't access the application. And when you ask the user, can you run a ping test? The question remains, what is a ping test? So it becomes very difficult to manage the user problems when the user isn't technical. If you add to that the variety of ISPs, the connectivity issue, the location of the home, these are tangible technical problems that really can hinder the ability of a network engineer to be able to support a remote organization. And if you think about a dozen or 20 users, that's not a problem. But you start adding some of these call centers, some of these network, sort of sales agents. These are thousands of people that now access the data center, trying to get to the application, whether it's in the cloud or whether it's in the data center or whatever it is, and they're having problems, and the problems need to be resolved. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Stefano to talk a little bit about some of these issues that network engineers are facing. Stefano.
Actually, before Stefano goes, I just do want to make one comment on what you said about the type of people work from home today. I think it's an important thing for IT to understand that these are people that have never worked from home, a lot of it, because you mentioned contact center agents and things like that. So the ability to even troubleshoot basic processes, problems isn't really there, where a professional remote worker might have a little bit more knowledge and experience in these things. So that also is throwing a monkey wrench into the situation.
Yes.
Yeah, and definitely, like, the home network environment is totally different from the corporate on-premise one, right? Because when users are on premises, they have control on the hardware, on the network hardware, such as routers, switches, and access points. The internet and WAN connection are generally configured with high availability and quality of the services, right? To make sure that all different type of traffics prioritized or queued accordingly. Clearly, COVID changed everything. So now working from home, IT, as there was research found out, right, has no control over the network hardware, because each one of us has in their own homes a consumer-grade Wi-Fi router that is, only accessible from inside, is not managed centrally by the enterprise. And same for the internet speed and quality is a consumer grade. There is no QoS, there is no redundancy. So when the connection is bad, or someone cuts the fiber down the road, or there is a storm, you're out of luck. So different environments that are unique to themselves. And if you add into that the Wi-Fi coverage, again, with consumer grade hardware, there is no concept in optimizing Wi-Fi configuration, making sure that your SSID doesn't overlap with your neighbors, or even do a site survey to make sure that you are configuring your access point the correct way. As Giovanni said, users are not technical, and it's not their time, and they don't have to really troubleshoot connectivity problems. They still need every day to access a video conferencing system like they did when they were in the office. They need to access their productivity applications, which can be located on-prem, in the cloud, or a mix. So it's a very new complex environment where legacy network monitoring solutions, such as based on SNMP, for example, or packet capture or flow analysis, are kind of ineffective because they cannot reach. They monitor from the data center, and not from the remote hand where the user sits, right? And this is something that we're all familiar with. So as a result, when a user opens a ticket, IT support is really chasing a needle in the haystack and spending considerable amount of time than before in the process, because you are in this like non-control environment. So in the next slide, please, Giovanni, how can enterprises and IT can regain control and reestablish the same efficiencies that it had before this major shift? Well, IT needs a solution that monitors the network and application performance remotely from the end user perspective. That's very important to regain control and assure a great end user experience, and also quick troubleshooting, because in the end, it's not just the time of the end user, the quality of their work, but it's also the time of the IT team that is now struggling with many more tickets and many more hours spent in troubleshooting end user issues. So the tool should be, of course, automatically and continuously verifying that the user can reach the application. So it's an active type of probing and network monitoring, but also at the same time, verifying there is enough bandwidth for voice and video calls. And that's something that, of course, you cannot rely on QoS because the internet is best effort, but nevertheless, you still need to make sure that packet loss, network jitter, and latency overall are within parameters. Otherwise, with that data, the IT can decide whether or not, if there is the opportunity to switch a different SP, or maybe purchase a better connection type. Then let's not talk about even VPN and VDI systems. Clearly, also that's something else that you can see from an SNMP perspective, that the VPN server or the VDI front ends are up and running, but what the end user sees is a different story. So really, network monitoring from the client perspective is very, very important. So the benefit is that once there is a network performance issues impacted by the end user, is not that, again, as the research that Zeus show at the beginning of the webinar, you're not waiting for, I think, 71% or even more of the problems reported by the IT, but I'm sorry, by the end user, but it's the IT that is able to proactively detect problems, and this solution, such a solution, will be able to pinpoint the root cause. And if that's not possible, at least provide all the information, historical and real time, to make sure that the data is available to quickly troubleshoot and understand the root cause, right? So really, to conclude, that there are really few key points that such a solution should have. First of all, report the Wi-Fi metrics, of the home environment, because most of users are, of course, connecting wirelessly to their home router. Second, it's very important to have technologies such as path analysis to understand if a performance issues are occurring in the first stop within the ISP, or beyond that in the transport part of the internet, or at the doors of your application or hosting provider. You really want to make sure with path analysis to highlight which hops or routes are really degraded because of increasing round trip time or packet loss. Internet throughput is another very important data point to understand that at least you have enough download and upload speed to sustain a good voice and video over IP. And lastly, of course, run HTTP tests or web SaaS application verification to make sure that the application is available and well responding. With that, I think Giovanni has now some slides about use cases and how we help customers that were struggling with this during the beginning of the pandemic to regain the control and visibility.
Yes, thank you, Stefano. So I want to talk about one use case. I mean, we have many customers use a solution, but this was one of the original customer for us for this specific application. It's a company called Marlet Funding. They are a unsecured consumer lending organization. They were founded in 2014, tremendous growth over the last few years. One of the top leaders in the lending services with $7 billion in loans and about 350,000 customers in the US. The company was organized, everything is very digital. The application process, the approval process, the funding, everything happens digitally within an hour, more or less, of the application submission. So very organized. In the word of the CIO, their network infrastructure was top tier with high-speed connectivity to the cloud and to the data center, with redundancy built in, And so a very efficient methodology to work and create network connectivity, and customer, meaning their specific employees, were always happy with the services received from the IT department. And specifically because their income depends on being able to manage these loans and these processes fairly quickly and efficiently. This is a company that culturally lived in the office. He told me they were having every day, they had a meeting, a standing meeting, where everybody got excited about coming to work, and they talked about the goals of the day, goals of the week. So a very office-driven culture, very office-driven organization, and they suddenly overnight became a remote work organization. So 250 employees, roughly their agents, they actually do the sales and the processing of the loans application, were suddenly remoted because of the COVID pandemic. And in the words of Brian, his world went from the most efficient network to absolutely no visibility in what was going on in the network. And I think this is probably the biggest pain and the biggest point for any IT department that has to do with remote worker is, as Stefano pointed out, the tools that exist in the market today and have been deployed for the last few years in enterprises don't give you the extension in the visibility into the home user. In effect, what happened is the home user become part of the network, where before that wasn't the case. And additionally, even companies that had VPN set up, they really didn't have the scale built in to be able to sustain and maintain X numbers of workers. It was really a limited usage to a few people that worked occasionally remotely, or they were field people. So this problem was very significant for them. It impacted their bottom line. And as you pointed out, they would get phone calls from users that said, my application is running slow, or I can't access the application. And really, they had no way to really view and understand what was the root cause of that problem. And if you think about it, if you're at home and you have some connectivity, but you have children playing video games online, you have video sharing, you have all these things. So it's very difficult to isolate the problem. And he said, the biggest challenge was, how do you address each individual problem, each individual user one at a time? It is not scalable, it is not efficient, and it's not sustainable. So those are significant problems that he was faced with. And like I said, he went from the perfect environment to an environment that was chaotic and difficult to manage, affecting their business and their bottom line. So he came to us, and what he discovered and what he loved about our solution is obviously being able to understand and monitor the ISP connectivity, the Wi-Fi, the application connectivity, all these things that you want to understand to be able to pinpoint the problem and isolate the problem. But more importantly, he had a dashboard that had a pretty holistic and view of the entire network, remote network at this point, and all their users, and be able to not only troubleshoot issues, but be able to actually prevent issues from happening based on the activity and the different level of testing that they were performing. So it went from being a how do we fix the problem to actually preventing problems from happening and getting users to be up and running efficiently and quickly if there was a problem. So in his words, the visibility aspect of our solution and being able to really understand and analyze where the issue could be, reduce the number of tickets. It helped improve the help desk efficiencies and giving back the control that you really had before the remote sort of migration of the workforce. So this is a company that actually, funny enough, he told me just the day or a month before the pandemic hit, they signed a lease on a 10-year lease on a brand new building. And, call it timing, call it luck, whatever you want to call it. This turned out not to be necessarily a problem, because as the building is being developed currently, they actually changed the design of the building internally to go from cubicle-specific environments where everybody had their own cube to more of a user environment where you can come in and it's not necessarily your cubicle, it's a cubicle that you can have access to and work for a day or 2 days or whatever that is. So in his words, even though the company culture was an office culture, they're now moving to a sort of hybrid model where if you want to come in, you can. If you don't want to come in, you don't have to. And so having these, the ability to monitor these devices, and these devices, just by the way, whether Mac or Windows, doesn't matter, has really given them the freedom to then manage however they want to their user community and their internal customers, and really efficiently continue to develop the business and maintain the profitability and bottom line they were so used to, and having a network that sort of reassembles back to what they started originally with, infrastructure that they could control and manage, and now they extended the management to the remote worker through the use of our solution. So, you know, I was actually listening to an interview this morning with the CEO of Morgan Stanley, who demanded that these people come back to work in September, but then quickly followed with the parenthesis that said, well, we don't need them to be back in the office all the time, but we want them back in the office at least 1 or 2 or 3 days a week. And so this is really interesting, because a lot of the traditional Wall Street firms, they wanted people in the office, more so than, say, the tech world, where Google, Facebook, and some of these other guys pretty much said that you can work, 2 days at home, 3 days at home, whatever the schedule permits, and you can come to the office when you need to for meetings and whatnot. But even the financial institutions are now pretty much agreeing that for the benefit of the workers, for the quality of life, for everything that goes with it, and user cost, a flex model is something they want to adopt. So I think, as pointed out earlier in the conversation, this is here to stay. This is not going anywhere. I think probably what happened this year or last year is accelerated this remote worker adoption by at least a decade. I think we were headed in that direction slowly, but now we suddenly got to that direction in a hurry. And technology like ours are helping people develop the infrastructure around this new paradigm where people at home are a part of the network. So you have to support them, you have to monitor them, you have to have visibility into their network to be able to really have productivity and continue productivity as well as usability. And so for that matter, user experience is critical. I think one of our other customers that use our solution is a large insurance company that uses this in their call center, and they've been able to reduce drastically the amount of tickets and increase the level of productivity for their callers by using the solution to be able to identify issues before they even become issues. And so, in conclusion, if you have a problem and you have many of these and many tickets, root cause analysis is an impact on the bottom line. So being able to quickly understand and eliminate these issues becomes a critical component of the solution. And I think with that, we go to question and answer.
Yeah, thanks for that. And again, as a reminder, please submit your questions in the Q&A tab in the dashboard. I do have a couple that came in. Stefano, here's a question for you. Are CIOs more interested in network management as a result from work from home? Have you seen obviously there's lots of companies that have seen an increase in business, the Zooms and things, but how's it impacted the network management industry?
Yeah, we saw more interest indeed, and also from the kind of higher ups within the IT organization. And I think for also, your slide and the points that you have in your slide at the beginning of the webinar, first of all, the home environment is much more obscure. IT doesn't know what's going on there. They cannot just, if a user have problems, just walk by the user and troubleshoot. You're not on-prem, co-located with an user. And it's highly disruptive, of course, when your internet or network performance is not well, right? So with everyone working from home now, IT, the IT organization is more reliant on network management and network monitoring, and also for the CIO is now one of the strategic priorities on their plate. On top of that, if you think, as Johnny was saying, like now work from home is here to stay because it's also kind of strategic, a competitive advantage also from hiring and retaining employees. So it's something that no matter what you have to offer, you need a new set of tools that will enable your team, first of all, to successfully support your workforce, but second, also for the IT team itself to save time and resources in the process, because now the game is, well, before you were 1 versus 10, where 10 is location, now is 1 versus 1,000 or 10,000, right? Which correspond to the number of locations that now you have to support.
Yeah, if I can add to that just quickly.
And Giovanni, before you answer, can you, why don't you get rid of the slide and everybody can see all three of us?
Where is my Zoom?
I think you just hit stop sharing.
Yeah, sorry. There we go.
There you go.
All right. So, yeah, I just wanted to add to what Stefano just said. That, you know, my conversation around the country with different enterprise CIO has been, you know, network performance monitoring or network monitoring in general isn't exactly a subject that comes up frequently for discussion at the high level of management. But I think the pandemic and this remote work organizational structure has changed the interest of the CIO because the bottom line gets affected by lack of productivity. When you have a call center with 15,000 people handling insurance claims and selling insurance policy, and if 10% of those people cannot perform their job, you can easily calculate what the impact on the bottom line is. So I think that has been the catalyst that has really helped us move our conversation at a more strategic level than typically a network monitoring solution is relegated to.
Okay, and here's another sort of related question. Kimmy, is there an application available today to test the home worker? The person said they admitted they stepped away and they didn't think they saw one from NetBeez specifically, but is there, you know, is there a way to test the actual home worker?
Yeah, it's NetBeez. So, sorry, but yeah, of course, we release the NetBeez remote worker agent. So the endpoint that runs on Windows and Mac, for example, clients, last year, also in response of the COVID and this immediate shift, right? Traditionally, we were mostly focused on WAN and Wi-Fi monitoring, on-prem monitoring, right? But you know, mid-March 2020, it was clear that you know, the future would have been uncertain, and that was actually a natural addition to our suite. So now the benefit is that we don't only monitor WAN or corporate location, we also monitor remote worker location or cloud environment. So all in one dashboard, you can visualize and also understand and compare performance from these different environments. And the application is very easy to install. It can also be instrumented from an MDM or, you know, management desktop apps. So extremely easy to use. And you have the same benefits as our on-prem traditional monitoring. So get all the real-time granular performance data that helps IT to really remotely troubleshoot and reduce time to resolution of incidents, save time, and also reduce escalation to level 3, because a major struggle is that now the service desk is escalating all these tickets to level 3, which they should spend their time with other projects rather than taking over service desk tickets, right? So that's really an enabler for that.
Yeah, thanks. And here's another question. Giovanni, maybe you want to take this, and Stefano, you can comment too. Does work from home impact the network engineer or sysadmin group more, or is it equal? I'll give you my thoughts on this, but I'm just curious. You guys talk to a lot of customers too.
Yeah, I think it really depends on the organization, but I think typically the network engineer is the first port of call, so to speak, but then the help desk becomes the target, because I think as the network development and deployment starts happening, people want to move the ticketing to the help desk and not necessarily keep the network engineers constantly troubleshooting. So I think it's a little bit of both. Initially, it's the network team that does this, but then it moves to and migrates to a help desk situation.
Right, thanks. And, you know, from my opinion, between SecOps, NetOps, and the help desk, it's affected them all. Is one more than the other? I'm not sure, but it's been enough that all their jobs have been disrupted. So this is clearly the most, you know, I haven't seen something that's disruptive, you know, perhaps since Y2K. Yeah. I had another question coming here around, do you think support for the flex remote work will become a competitive advantage for some companies? If so, which type of companies will gain from it? I do think it will be. I think companies that, especially when you see, I was watching with CNN this morning where they had a stat up that said, when you get down to millennials, I think it was like 70% said they don't ever want to work in an office again. Right now, that probably changes a little bit, but your ability to hire younger people certainly is diminished. So I'm curious.
I agree.
Yeah. Actually, from a NetBeez perspective, what are you guys doing from work from home?
We all switched to work from home without, you mean from a company policy perspective? Yeah, for us, it was a natural way to, you know, keep collaborating. We decided to be fully work from home. Of course, then for the future, we'll keep an office location if people want to meet, kind of almost as a lab. But for us, it was very easy. We use, you know, Slack and other applications to collaborate. So it didn't cause any disruption, but just it was natural progression. So yeah, but I can see that definitely will be a competitive advantage and probably something expected to have a work from home policy or somewhat flex, because I think everybody's understanding that it doesn't make sense to spend hours in traffic, gas, right? And it's not just good. And of course, for those industries or, you know, job titles that can work from home, why not? Generally, it's more a management. Sometimes there is the impression that you cannot manage or monitor your team, which is completely wrong, an impression.
Yeah, and I'm curious.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Jim.
I was going to say, I agree. I think being able to offer the work from home remote is an advantage, especially from a hiring perspective. And I know people and colleagues of mine that have said, well, if they ask me to come back to work permanently in the office, I'm leaving the company, because they got used to this model that gives them flexibility and a better way of life in many ways, being able to share family and work at the same time versus being in an office and on the road for 2 hours a day, basically trying to get home or to the office.
Yeah, and here's another question. I'll sort of paraphrase it for you, Stanley, and you were one of the founders. Just, you know, there's a lot of network management tools out there. Most of them focus on network elements. When you founded NetBeez, you decided to focus on user experience. And I'm curious, just from, you know, looking back, why was that? Because that's something that you didn't really see from the network management industry.
Yeah, first-hand experience as a network engineer, I realized that SNMP is more an MS, so a network management system, right? It tells you the device up, down, and other information, which is important. Doesn't mean that those tools don't mean to exist, but when you're working in to support a workforce that provides services, you need end-to-end telemetry data from the user perspective, 24/7 almost. So we realized that active end-to-end performance measurement was key. First of all, to proactively detect problems before users do. And second, also to have that fault isolation information from distributed network monitoring. So meaning deploying sensor from multiple vantage points to quickly understand if it's a local, more network, or global, more on the application side type of problem. So yeah.
All right, I'm looking through the questions here. We have one here. What are the biggest challenges for network teams for work from home? You know, obviously there's a lot of performance issues, connectivity issues. Is there a few that really stand out?
Number one, Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is the top #1 problem, and some teams require their remote users to wired. So they remove quite some pain. So definitely Wi-Fi, and second, ISP issues. That's also the second most pressing problem that they have to troubleshoot and spend time with. And third, I would say, is just a lot of ticket being escalated from from the L1 to the L3, because of course at level 1 they don't have the skill set nor the tools to actually take care of those tickets without escalation. So
yeah. Some of the other problems that I see is just a user's inability to really articulate what the problem is, right? Like, as I mentioned, that a lot of people never work from home, and so they might call and just say the internet's down. Well, the internet's never down, right? But that's perhaps it's their connection, it could be their Wi-Fi, as you said, and I think their ability to translate what's going on to the problem is, and that sort of underscores the importance of being able to connect, for IT to be able to see into the person's home.
Right, because I mean the users are non-technical, and that's not their task, right? And also IT doesn't want to really communicate and over the phone with the remote user, and neither the remote user, right? So by having something, a sensor that actively and not passively, without even listening, the user conversation is just in parallel. So for privacy is the best. Users don't feel like they're spied, right? But having such a tool that provides telemetry data, simple tests across the network, and keeping all the metrics reported centrally, that is a great enabler of reduce time to resolution, basically, and team efficiency for IT.
So I'm looking here. I don't see any other questions here. So in lieu of that, I think we can give people a few minutes back. Do you have any final comments from Giovanni or Stefano? Do either of you have any final comments?
Yeah, I think, as I said before, this model of working remotely is not disappearing. It's here, and I think it has a number of benefits, including efficiencies, including reduction in traffic, including all sorts of benefits to the people that work from home and companies as well, as by reducing cost of real estate and all sorts of activities. I think what they need, as we discussed so far, is the ability to monitor those locations and the ability to intervene. Because typically what happens in enterprises, there's the sort of drop-in, I'll fix your problem. The network engineer goes to somebody's desk, logs in a computer, says, let me check it and fix it. Well, that luxury doesn't exist anymore. So now you have to be able to monitor something from a distant location, be able to act on it, solve the problem, and get the person up back in the application and start working again. So, like I said, this is something that's here to stay. I don't think it's going to disappear. I think people got used to it. People like it. And I think companies are getting used to it and are trying to figure out what is the best way for them to mix the environment and also understand how to monitor the environment.
Unless you have any final words, Stefano, I'll wrap up.
Yeah, no, I would say, don't fight the change, embrace the change. There are the tools that are available to, follow this new normal. I see a lot of people still resistant to, they want to like almost drag employees to the offices. There is no need unless for some industries and some job titles. So again, embrace the change. There are the tools there, and it's just in this case a change for the best for most of us. So why not, right? If I can, not spend 2 hours of my time in traffic and put more traffic and so let's embrace the change.
All right, well, thanks everybody, and I appreciate everybody joining me. And if you want to, and I just want to invite everybody to join the ONUG community of network thought leaders. Registration's open at onug.net. And other than that, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on one of our great webinars.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks.